All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're live. You have the floor.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back. We're going to start this afternoon with the Board of County Commissioners budget and administration budget. We have Ms. Lucy Dance that will be presenting that.
Okay. Our budget hasn't changed a lot since last year. The lobbyist has gone down a little bit. That's based on the current contracts and what we estimate coming forward. And down under publications, the Northeast Florida Regional Council dues used to be paid for out of pooled cash, and now they've moved that back into the Board of County Commissioners budget. So other than that, there's minimal changes based on communications and moving staff in and out. Or no, that's a different budget. So we're good. Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. All right. The administration budget, the salaries have increased because we've moved Heidi into the administration department, and Julie, the PIO, was moved back from the IT department to the administration department. Travel expenses are a little more because Julie and I attend the Florida Records Management Conference yearly, and it is a little further away than it has been in the past. Additional cell phones based on people moving back into the department. Other than that, everything's pretty much status quo.
No questions.
You guys good?
Yes.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. Let's go into
Finance.
financial services. This should be almost as quick. Financial services, the budget office. No changes there really at all, just kind of adjusting for actuals in the past and moving kind of budget around, but no total change. The 1% COLA, like you see in all the other departments, adjustment there. So that's the budget in a nutshell, the budget office. As far as purchasing department, they've had some adjustments in salary over the course of the years, people moving and organizational changes, and that resulted even with the 1% correction of an actual decrease in personal services. And the two big increases in operating are due to software maintenance moving and licensing moving forward from software that we installed this fiscal year, actually began, I guess, last fiscal year, into this fiscal year for fuel and monitoring fuel expenditures and flow and all that kind of
It's
stuff.
moving from on-premise to the cloud, is that?
Right, exactly, yeah. Well, it's a whole big system, including the cloud. So, and purchasing is, we're also asking for, we have two decision units. First is for a position. This position is it's advertised or put out there as a property control agent. The primary responsibility of this person will be surplus, pictures, selling surplus, meeting buyers of our surplus out. So we had a half-time position a couple years ago, and that person at half-time was bringing in an average of $34,000 a year on selling our surplus. So we just put that $34,000 in there, but really the assumption is that this position, if we would get the full-time position, would bring in, you can say double that, which would more than cover the cost of this one FTE.
Commissioner Sullivan has a question. Go ahead, Commissioner. I need to unmute. I need to unmute on.
Yeah, I thought I clicked on it.
Can you ask to unmute?
I did.
Commissioner Sullivan, can you unmute?
I got it now. I had to break it up. I did just quickly on the surplus, because I look at that, we do handle a lot of surplus. I notice when we have our meetings. When I go to meetings like the FAC meeting and some of these other meetings, they always have like contractors who want to take over those kind of jobs. Do we have regular contractors that we deal with when we're doing the surplus stuff, or just give me a little bit of information on how that works?
Hi, Commissioner Sullivan, it's Holly. We currently don't right now. We do have the option to contract out with like an auctioneering company if we wanted to. We've dipped into that idea a couple times in the past, but never really found it to be something that would really be beneficial to us based on the type of surplus that we have and we need. It's always worked in our best interest to have actually somebody come out and do it themselves due to it being in all the different locations around the county. We surplus everything from commuters to vehicles as well. So it just, in the past, it was never really feasible for the kind of surplus that we have, because those types of big auctioneering companies love to have like big stacks of vehicles and equipment and things of that nature. But also what I wanted to mention with this too, although their primary responsibility would be surplus, they would also act as backup to our warehouse staff. We had that part-time position a couple years ago that we ended up making into full-time, and then that position actually kind of transferred into working for the actual warehouse full-time rather than surplus, because of the needs of the warehouse have been so big. So not only will this person focus on surplus and we'll be able to get all of our stuff out that way, it'll also be that backup position for what we need down there as well.
Yeah, that's fine. I just was wondering, and yeah, based on what I see coming forward at the meetings, we need somebody to make sense to have a person kind of dedicated to do that. Okay, that was my question.
Yes, sir, no problem.
And actually, since we're so emphatic on the first one, you want to go with the second?
The second decision unit?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So the second decision unit we have in, it's roughly, oh, it's up there now. Okay, so it's about $11,000. What that is a giant fan for our warehouse. Down in the warehouse, it gets to be probably about 110, sometimes almost 120 degrees down there, stagnant heat in the summer. And our employees down there, I mean, obviously they're hot. I'm trying to get that obviously for their health and safety down there. It'll circulate not only the central storage warehouse, but it'll also help with the fleet shop that is right next door as well. So I think that's just an essential piece of equipment that we really need down there, just for our employees. So.
All set.
That's it.
That's it.
Thank you, Holly.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Appreciate it.
Hello. How are you?
Now we have Director Bamboo, Human Resources. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, okay.
Rock and roll.
So I'll start with the human resources budget. There's not there aren't any significant changes to it. If you take out the $30,000 for educational reimbursement that used to be in the pool fund, my increase is about 5%. So just some of the increases that we have. The professional services account, that's for our employee assistance program, but we don't have the actual renewal yet. We won't have that until July or August. So that's just a contractual increase that we have to do every year. The fingerprinting for under other contractual services, we've decided that we were going to fingerprint our volunteers, which we have in the library emergency services and other places in the county. So that increased our budget for that because it's coming out of the HR budget. Travel expenses is just staff development. We had a premium increase to our automobile insurance for the risk management vehicle that we have. The $450 is for maintenance on our copier. And then we added $50 to the printing and binding for manuals and things like that that we issue throughout the year. Again, the $30,000 is for tuition reimbursement, which used to be in the pooled account and is now in the HR account. Some of the other changes that we have, we added $1,000 to our advertising. The reason why we did that, it used to be split up within the departments. However, it just makes more sense to put it in the human resources budget, because when we advertise a position, if it's a position that we're having difficulty filling, we can focus on some specialized areas to advertise, and it'll help us with recruiting a diverse workforce and things like that. Last year, we hired a new position, and that's where the credit came in for the $4,100. And then NeoGov and Ping Board are just both contractual increases.
What's paying for software?
Yeah, it's a software, it's through the IT department.
What is it used for?
So it has all of, it's kind of a roster, if you will. It has all the employees listed in it, and it has pictures of them all, locations,
Oh,
addresses, phone numbers. NeoGov, the increase there is a 5% contractual increase, and that's
Yes.
for the use of governmentjobs.com, which is through our application program. And then the $500 increase to conferences is to cover continual education, such as source manager goes to a conference every year. And that's the changes to the human resources budget. Our next budget is the health insurance fund. So I have Sherry here from the Bailey Group to kind of go over this in more detail, but I do want to point out that we did get the budget from the clinic, from our clinic, and so that will have to be changed on here. It's budgeted right now for $820,000. The real cost of it's going to be $852,000. The total cost of the expenditures will be $875,000, $380. So I'll get that to finance. We just received that. Some of our insurance products we received late, so we don't get them in the budget. Sherry's going to go over the actual health insurance changes. She has a small PowerPoint, short PowerPoint. To go over that, please.
Well, looking at it, this clinic line item, is this just the FTEs or just medication, or includes everything?
It includes everything. So if you look at the quote, you'll see that it's medications, it's lab analysis,
Okay.
supplies, all the things.
And they're under this clinic line item, okay.
Or is it 820 now?
Yeah, you can enter
852.
52.
We'll get that updated.
Yeah, I'm not sharing it yet. I'm trying to pull it up first.
Sure, do you want to change your favorites so that I don't know, you'll be on?
Yeah, yeah.
Screen, Joel?
Yeah, I will, should be on this one up there.
So I'll go back first.
Welcome.
Hi, how are you? All right, so you can go ahead to the next slide. Go ahead. All right, so first few slides are basically just your current year-to-date and projected annual information related to your health insurance fund and where we're coming in at. As you can see in the year-to-date 2019 through 20, we actually ended the year in really good shape. We had just over $1 million in the positive. So based on that, we've got a nice, strong, healthy health insurance fund, which is always a good thing to move into this new year. Right now, year to date, in the 2020-2021 year, we are just barely upside down. It's running just right on track with what we are funding. So I am very happy about that. Now, of course, the projected year-to-date or projected year-end is showing an upside down of $346,000. Do I think that's what it'll actually end up being? No. Lots can happen between now and then, and we are using a 6.5% trend. You're not running quite that bad as far as your trend is concerned, so we probably won't end up quite in that upside down feature there. So just keep that in mind as you are looking at that. You go ahead. As far as high cost claimants are concerned, you can see in 19-20 plan year, you had 4 members over $175,000. So far this year, we have 0. We have 1 that is getting close. It is not unusual for this time of year for us to not be quite to that point yet. But we are running very well for this so far this year for your highest cost claimants. We have 2 right now that are over $100,000 and 7 that are over $50,000 so far this year. Go ahead. This is your historical per employee per month, per employee per year cost. As you can see, right now, we are running a little bit higher total than we were last year. Now, when we met this time last year, we had just had a very, very expensive medication that was no longer being used. As you can see, in 2018, our cost was $11,763. Almost all of that was driven from one individual who was taking a $60,000 medication. That individual is no longer on the plan and is no longer going to be using the medication. So we've seen a significant drop in our costs last year. We are back up, but we're still back up in a pretty reasonable amount. $10,111 is your current employee per month or per year number. So we do have a slight increase in our trend, but your 4-year trend, so if we look at your entire cost over the last 4 years, you're averaging at about 4.5%, which is lower than national trend. National trend right now is running about 6.5%, 7%, depending on who you ask. This is your contribution, employee contribution history. As you can see, we've not had an increase in the employee costs since 2016. And your rates are very low compared to what we see in the marketplace right now. And this is the employer funding. We did change the employer funding in 2016. It's running $10,500 per employee per year. It doesn't matter whether the employee has employee only or full family coverage. We fund the same amount for every person. So that's important to note on all of those other things that we were looking at as well. If somebody has family coverage, they still only count as one, even though all those people are counting towards claims. So we can't necessarily line up the employee only rate with the average costs and things of that sort. So we did run the actuarial numbers, and the actuary, I believe the full report from the actuary was provided to you all, so you can take a look at that if you'd like and ask me any questions if you have any. It's pretty self-explanatory. They are recommending an increase in the fully insured equivalents of 5.44%. This again is using trends. It's using 15% average increase in your stop loss with premium, which we don't have yet. Also, we included the clinic and Canna RX in that budget and that type of thing. So all of those expenses are included in that funding information. As I mentioned previously, your actual fund is nice and healthy. And because of that, I don't necessarily think we need to increase the funding that is coming from either the employees or the employer into that account. I think we can keep that the same because we have a nice solid foundation there. However, it is always recommended that we increase the retiree and COBRA rates to reflect what the actuary is showing. And so that would be an increase of 5.44% of those rates. And you can see those differences if you decided that you wanted to do that.
And that only applies to retiree and COBRA
members.
members.
Correct. Yeah. Again, we wouldn't necessarily have to, but it is a good idea to do that. Your COBRA and your retirees are your most expensive populations. And because we are by state law not allowed to charge more than what the employee equivalent is, but we should charge them at least those employee equivalents. And so that's what the actuary is saying that we could use this year.
They don't cost the county anything. It's just that the experience.
Yeah. So the experience for a retiree and a COBRA member. So let me back up and say, so we charge the retirees and the COBRA members the numbers that you see listed there, the fully insured equivalents, and then the 2% addition is what the difference is with the COBRA rates. The actual cost of a person who is a retiree and a COBRA member could be more or less than that, depending on what their claims are like, because it's a straight pass-through of claims for those individuals. So you could have a retiree that's got single coverage that is costing well over $594 per month, just depending on their claims. You could have a retiree that's costing a lot less than that, But actuarially, we have to charge we have to make sure that their rate is not above the fully insured equivalent for the group as a whole. So that's why the actuaries are saying this is what we could legally get away with charging them, because we can't collect more than what this is actuarially, even though their costs are probably more than that. Most of the time, a COBRA person and a retiree is not going to elect that coverage unless they need it, and they're usually the high cost claimants.
High experience.
And that's pretty much it. Those are basically my recommendations. I think we should pretty much keep everything status quo for your general population, and then I would recommend making those changes for COBRA and retiree. Again, that's up to you. We have a nice healthy fund balance, but it is advisable to do that too for the actuaries.
How is our fund doing overall compared to funds in jurisdictions around us?
Yeah, you're in really great shape and have been for a while. We did have that really rough year 2 years ago, but outside of that, you've run really low trend wise. And because we've made sure your fund balance is always making money, basically is kind of the way that it is, you're in great shape. And I have confidence that even if you didn't make a change, you'd be fine.
To attribute our position compared to others to our clinic?
The clinic in CanRx absolutely has a major driving factor in that. I'm seeing trends with most of the rest of my groups in the high single digits, low double digits. But your trend for the last several years has been well below that, with the exception of that 1 year where we really had a rough year.
What year was it?
2000.
2 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. So 2019-20 plan year, I think is the year it was. And that really was driven by that one individual who was taking that really, really expensive medication. And just so you are aware, we do have a member who just started taking a relatively expensive medication that's about $1,500 a month. And that could go up depending on what happens with that individual. But it's nowhere near as the $60,000 that we were looking at previously. Okay. Any questions? All righty.
Good, I asked my two.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Sherry.
You're welcome.
Good to see everybody in person.
Without masks.
Without masks. All right, bye-bye now.
So the next part of my budget is our liability insurance. Again, this is another case where we won't have the actual numbers until it's mid-June. We have an estimate of where we think we're going to fall. Under general liability insurance, last year it was $203,000 is where we ended up. This year we're estimating around $219,000. That covers, our inland marine coverage, general liability coverage, things like that. Workers' compensation, we have had, we've had 26 claims since October. 15 of them were medical only, so they were incidents where the employee went back to work. 11 were lost time, and those all include COVID-related incidents. We are looking at probably a 5 to 10% increase to workers' compensation. Our experienced mod rate is 1.54, so depending on what the state does as far as increases, we'll probably be closer to the lower end of the increase. Property and casualty, we had 2 storms last year. We're looking at probably close to a 10 to 20% increase there. Under the public officials liability insurance, we've had 3 claims since October. So the increase there is projected 10 to 15%. Other insurance is our aviation liability insurance. We haven't had any claims. We don't anticipate having any type of increase to that line item. And then the public safety, accidental death and dismemberment. There's no increase there, but under the tentative 21-22 budget, it should read $10,000, not $2,000. So that'll have to be updated.
So it'll be a zero.
So it'll be a 0 increase, and that's it for the insurance.
Okay.
I apologize for being late for the administrators, but I just didn't want to be here when Lucy told Jorge he wouldn't get in the car.
So lastly, I have my decision units.
Yeah.
The first one is the Leadership Academy. So as you know, with Mr. Cameron leaving, he is one of our instructors for the academy, and then Dr. Saviak is our other instructor. He's no longer with the Fletcher County Sheriff's Office. Dr. Saviak had agreed to teach in the Leadership Academy in exchange for attendance for the Fletcher County Sheriff's Office. So that's how we're going to work that out over the last year and a half. That won't be the case this year because he is separated from them. And so what I put in here was salaries for 2 instructors. I would like to have Dr. Saviak and then of course I can't talk to Mr. Cameron until after he has left the county, but we would like to hopefully have him come back and teach for us as well. The cost for that would be approximately, we have about 27 classes. We're looking at about $400 per person a class. So it's about $21,600 total. But it does give us, if we put the budget at 25,000 instead of the 30, it does give us a little bit of wiggle room in case we have some additional classes, additional speakers, things like that. We would write contracts for both. And so anyways, that's what that's for. And then the actual budget for the Leadership Academy would remain the same, which covers things like the retreat, the books, the training. We looked at doing maybe some workshops in this next academy, which are a little costly. The food for the retreat, the speakers for the retreat, there's a lot of things that get tied into that overall amount.
Can you explain to the public some of the benefits of having the Leadership Academy?
Sure. So the Leadership Academy helps us in creating leaders within our own organization. So we bring, so the first group that we did were department heads, and it teaches collaboration, it teaches a lot of different aspects of how you lead, and it teaches you more so it's about not so much about yourself, but about the people that you lead, and it's changing the culture in the organization. And we've seen the effects of it throughout the organization, very positive. And so we would like to continue that.
Some of these leadership trainings, if you go outside to get them, is very expensive per employee.
Absolutely.
Having it here, it allows multiple employees to benefit from this experience.
Yes, and when we do our retreats, we do offer it to the other agencies in the area, so they get to benefit from that as well. And so it's all about collaboration, working together, building teams.
So we're planning to extend it to other agencies beyond our county
Correct.
itself.
Correct. My second decision unit is for a human resources manager. I requested a human resources manager for a number of reasons. Mainly because I need someone that can work hand in hand with the human resources director on issues that arise, dealing with employment-related issues, managing day-to-day issues with staff, the recruitment process, performance management, things like that. It's to help balance the department, but also as a succession plan. Right now, the human resources firm doesn't have one. And I don't have anybody that, when I take a vacation, that can step in and take care of the needs of the department and of the organization while I'm gone. And so I think it would be good, not only for that reason, but to also have a succession plan. Many times also, I've come down and I've counseled with Mr. Cameron and said, I'm thinking about doing this, because, the decisions that I make affect the entire organization, and they have a trickle-down effect. So I always have to be looking down the chessboard and, okay, if I make this move, how does it affect this? And so it's nice to be able to have somebody also who is knowledgeable in the human resources field to kind of bounce those ideas off of, and they may see it from a different perspective. And it helps us in the fact that, it creates less liability.
And also,
it's important to know that when you throw in a risk manager and you look at Pam's staffing, that she is understaffed by probably 2 or 3 FTEs. She's running very lean.
correct. Yeah, the other thing is that we've been changing, moving a lot of other responsibilities from the departments to HR that we've done in the past, right?
Right, so part of our NeoGov program, which is our recruiting and application processing program, we have shifted from the departments to directly to HR, because that's where it should be. Vetting applications, things like that are now in the HR department, doing references, those kind of things, and it should be, like I said. So that was taken from the departments and added to our staff, but we've increased in staff. We hired a risk manager the first year I was here, and then last year we hired a generalist who is performing those duties. We have other things though that occur during the year, like right now we're in union negotiations. We have investigations that we conduct. We have the pay plan changes coming up with minimum wage and things like that. So that takes away kind of some of my time to deal with other things. And so being able to kind of balance that out with somebody else would allow me to spend more time with my staff and help mentor and educate them as well.
Would the HR manager also be the assistant dean of students?
Probably. I don't know if you have any questions.
Anything else?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brian Eckinger, budget manager, is going to go over our non-departmental areas of the budget, which are just that, they're non-departmental. There's no specific director over top of that. So we kind of cover that in the budget office. So Brian.
Welcome, Brian.
First up, we have the Value Adjustment Board. Florida statute requires us to, if a property owner thinks that their value has been incorrectly calculated, they have the ability to protest it. That budget's staying the same. We have the medical examiner. We do not have these official costs in yet. We're just making estimated guesses. We are projecting an increase based on things like additional fatalities that have happened in the county. So again, prelim numbers, we're hoping to come in lower, but
Yeah, we don't have control over this budget.
Yes.
This is given to us by the state. The regional medical examiner splits it up, and then we just gets us our bill, basically, we're going to be charged.
And these contracted services, or this just is a bill that the state sends us?
I believe it's
No,
a
it's from
mutual agreement
yeah.
between our tri-county
Oh,
area. And I think the medical examiner puts out her budget and says basically, you owe me 26%, based on fatalities. There's a number of things that calculate to come up with our shares. We have the law enforcement education funds. This is based on, I believe it is confiscated equipment. Degree further. Basically, it's almost a trust. The revenue comes into us, and we can only spend it on reimbursing the sheriff's office for education for their employees. Next is interfund transfers. So an interfund transfer is the way we're able to move money between funds. You'll see things like debt services that we use non-ad valorem dollars to cover. A lot of these are just the annual things you see every year. The legal aid fund. Fund 128 is the new grant and special revenue fund, where in previous years it would be just in everybody's regular budget. If there was a local match or things like that weren't covered by the grant, but it was still associated with that grant. But now we're able to call it out a little more directly and say, this is the funding for that. So you see that for the 5 minibuses, part of the 5310 grant, the safer expense, that includes holiday pay and some additional overtime that the safer grant doesn't cover. So SHIP, we've already discussed. We, instead of sending money from the general fund to the SHIP fund, we are just funding the 10% admin fee that were allocated through the SHIP program. We're funding one FTE partially up to that. I believe it's 35,000.
Yes, 35,000.
If we get more funding, like Joyce was saying, it seems like we're moving towards that direction. We can adjust that percentage that we're split funding them. Public Safety Communications Network, that's the new radio fund. The debt service is increasing considerably because it was wrapped around old debt being retired for the old radio system. Now that's gone, this one's coming back up. The Capital Preservation Fund and all the Fund 316s, those are through the new CIP program. We're showing those in two different funds now instead of it all sitting in the general fund to give a more transparent approach to looking at how we're doing our CIP program.
And
So that 471 is the one that, the same amount that Heidi presented for the current year.
Correct. So that was just the preservation line.
we're doing everything we can to pull things out of the general fund that really shouldn't be, kind of be in there, which is like capital projects, grants, those type of things. And this is part of our, that's, to explain the big difference in what's budgeted and
General fund, yeah.
this year and tentative, So it's not like increasing the budget, it's just moving the money out of the general fund into another fund. So
Making it more visible where it's going. and what's
Exactly.
going on.
Exactly.
And the last one is the Fund 215. That's the new debt service for the Sheriff's Operations Center. Naturally, when you take out debt, you guys set up a debt service fund, so we're transferring non-ad valorem dollars to cover that.
How many TIFs do we have?
TIF, we have, I think, 3 that we're paying, 4 that could. I think the Nelson.
Their property value hasn't reached the dip yet, so we're not.
Yeah, 4.
So, well, we do pay for it.
Yeah.
We don't pay the
Right.
rent.
Yeah, we don't pay that.
Are any of them sunsetted?
No. That's true.
Not for a while.
So these are like 20 years.
Yeah, I think they're at least maybe 35.
You can't continue that trend, you'll cripple yourself.
Yeah, because that kind of freezes the tax.
Any increases go to the
To
tip.
the TIF, yeah.
You can't keep up with growth and inflation doing that.
How many do we have?
We have 4 total. We only paid 3 currently. The 4th one's, I think, getting close.
What's the big one?
Pump Coast CDD, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the CD.
Yeah, Benell's still kind of far out there, but last year was the first year that Marine Land got money, or sorry, this year, 21. All right.
And you seldom get the results that you anticipate
Yes.
when you do.
Yeah, I think the Palm Coast one's probably looking good. I don't know if it's because of the CRA, because of that or not, but yeah, it's true.
Up next, we have the pooled expenditures account. Things we've seen in other people's departments that we've been discussing over the last 2 days. They've said, oh, this used to be in pooled. So you're going to see some significant decreases. The first line, $25,000. We moved that to HR's budget.
Yeah.
Everything else is reasonably the same. We put a slight increase in for auditing services, the contract finish. We're able to extend for renewals, but we just wanted to have a little buffer there for whatever negotiated pricing we get. You'll see the assessments went down to 0.
That's because we sold that property, right?
Yes, so the town center CDD alone is about 60 or 68,000 if we pay it earlier, pay it late. We moved, I believe, $5,000 into Tim's budget to capture the things like you were saying, stormwater fees, all the other non-ad valorem assessments that we can't get away from. We just relocated to him since he is the one who's best to know, do we actually own that property? What are we using it for? If he keeps seeing that we're wasting money every year paying for it, maybe that's a property we would, like to get rid of. 30,000. We moved the tuition reimbursement to HR's budget. Membership to
The town center, the sale allowed us to recapture those huge
Correct, yes.
fees
Yes.
that we've been paying.
Right, yeah, absolutely. We have the membership to the Northeast Regional Council. We've moved that into the BOCC budget. We just saw that. Inmate medical, ever since the new vendor started at the jail, I want to say it was 2 years ago, we've seen costs steadily going down. So we could probably bring that down a little lower, but to take a slower, more conservative approach, we only brought it down 20,000. Maybe next year, we can bring it down more and more. That's really it. So then we get down to the agency funding. We've moved those all to different departments. We have, at this time, eliminated the Veterans Court. That was an idea that was started several years ago, and nothing has moved forward with it. If it's the board's decision to, actually make a movement, we're more than happy to put that back in there. But we didn't want to just keep budgeting something that we're not moving. Everything else there is pretty much normal. Then you get down to the debt service. We paid off the phone and elections equipment earlier this year. We are also looking at paying off early the full commercial paper that we took for the financial software. Given our fund balance and how it's been growing, we think it's a more prudent move to pay that off early and not incur the fees and interest costs, even though it's a low interest, just to free up our available draw if we needed to pull the line of credit at any time. So for full, if you have any questions, I know it's a larger budget. Now we got the TIF, also known as CRAs, a couple different names there. All these numbers are based on 5% property evaluation. Like we built our budget, we built this budget accordingly. When the preliminary numbers come in June 1, we can make adjustments. When property appraiser comes out with certified numbers July 1, that will lock in those numbers. For budgeting, it could come in more or less depending on VAB issues, but generally that will be pretty much locked in at July 1. Next up, reserves. Reserve for fund balance, we just take 5% of operating revenues, and that gets plugged in just basically as a safety net that we should never have less than that amount of money in the general fund. The reserves for designated future use, that is, for lack of a better term, a plug number. That is anything else that's not specifically outlined for another reason, it can be held in that pot of money. Moving forward, that would be, as John likes to talk about, fund balance. We could have a negative contra asset account or contra revenue account and showing that different manners.
Would that cover the 312 that we've been talking about?
It's pretty close.
Okay.
I want to say that number is 21 or 22, give or take.
Changes because of the growth, but yeah.
Commissioner Sullivan has raised his hand.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, just a quick question on the reserves, because I know that's a really good thing we're doing. Is anything that's showing here, any of the new money that's coming in because of the federal funding that we're picking up, the 22 million?
No, not yet. Hasn't come in yet.
So this is not planning for it in any of these numbers. The American Rescue Plan
Be a different fund.
Yeah.
So they may increase, the reserves may increase more.
No,
Not
they
here.
need to be used, but I don't think they'll be part of the reserves.
Yeah, that money will go into a different fund and be accounted for separately. It won't mess with the general fund at all.
Well,
Okay.
it could indirectly.
Yes.
Yeah, benefit.
Yeah,
Indirectly,
if we pick up what would be a future project in the budget, that it's an eligible project and we haven't budgeted for it yet, the fact that we release that money before the final budget could increase the reserves.
Right. Okay, I think it's good. I mean, it's good news.
Paper with that.
Yeah,
general
it is
fund.
what it is, yeah.
Okay.
Then you see vessel registration, that's new this year. Previously, we used to budget it within the department, just in a separate line. It was basically like a holding account that if they needed to make a very large repair for vessel registration, we didn't have to run immediately to the board. You know, it was there at Mr. Cameron's disposal. But now we're showing it completely in reserves. We want to fund a project. We talked about take a look at the CIP. There might be some projects in there that we can fund out of vessel registration.
What are these small DRI fees, like
Yeah.
595 and 677?
Those are residual money from a lot of deals over the years. Most of them are DRI fees that were created. They sit in perpetuity until we meet the obligation. There's one, I think it's the Harbor View. There's something in there. One of these reserves is about like a police car or radio fees. And until we prove that we've met that obligation, we just show it here now. When time prevails, we try to chip away at this.
Yeah. That's the thing with time prevails, but
Yeah.
because some of these are really old.
Yes.
Yeah, so
It's a couple decades.
And then, I've talked to Heidi a couple times, with the big movements you guys are making with fire services, there's, money for a EMS facility, I believe that's Palm Coast Plantation. So if you guys had in your strategic plan where you're gonna lay it out, that's good money, it's not a lot, but, it could definitely offset some design costs maybe. Or if it's specifically for apparatus, you could buy a rescue.
And that one that says, all solid waste debt retirement, is that solid waste that Heidi was talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
You heard her say something about 1.2 million, that corresponds to that. And there's historic courthouse reserves as part of our agreement. For renting that space, we hold back, I believe it's $12,000 a year for both, or no, it's 8,000, because 60,000 is the increase. 8,000 for the roof replacement and 8,000 for an HVAC replacement. And they're just growing for if and when.
Needs replaced,
Yep.
yeah. And I see that we talked about yesterday morning, the helicopter fund, so it's going from 750 to 1.2 million.
Correct. We were doing 250,000 each year. We decided this year to try to catch up on prior years in which, I want to say it was before John got here, we just had the same 250,000 budget every year. We never grew it. So to try to play a little bit of catch up, we thought it was prudent to add, another year to get back on track.
If we should secure grants on any of those, these funds are subject to be reallocated.
Yes. That's all I got.
Okay, next, court services.
Financial analyst Amanda Gilbert helping us with those.
Should have waited 2 days.
That's all right.
She's also gonna do the debt service for us. Had a lot of questions on debt service.
Hello. All right, so a lot of these are pretty small and kind of stay the same. This one, we had a decrease here on our communications. Can you scroll down to the next page? Why?
Nope.
All right. I guess, is this the one? Okay, so just based on actuals, they weren't using that money. They were, I was gonna say, this is the one that we saw was over budgeted. So we just brought it down because they didn't need it.
That's the court administrator, right? That's that email back and forth.
Yes, yeah, that's,
But I think we were doing 10,000 or something. He was always spending just like 2, so like, hey, can we bring it down?
yeah, and he was fine with
Okay.
it. Guardian ad litem. That's where everything here is pretty much the same too. They do have they did have a couple of decision units though at the end. So they were asking for a cell phone for their attorney, one of their attorneys there. And the other one,
And these are state employees.
yes. So we do have one employee that is at Guardian ad litem, but these requests are for state employees.
Do we provide cell phones to any other state employee?
We provide 2 cell phones to the guardian ad litem. So one already that's previously a guardian ad litem, one to our employee, the one that we pay for. This would be a third for the attorney that I'm not sure if she's the attorney only for Flagler County or where it is, but this is a request for a third. We do provide them 2 sets presently of IT equipment as well, laptops, monitors, etc. That's okay.
Their other request was additional office space as well for their employees there.
Well, the position, that causes me some concern, because it's really not the county's responsibility. And secondly, once you know, engage with one of these, it's very difficult to back off in a downturn or anything like that. If we've got financially stressed again, it'd be difficult to make that correction. So my advice to our board would be to be very careful about venturing into that kind of significant recurring expense.
And to Mr. Cameron's note, we did have that conversation when I came on board when we didn't have money for computer replacements as to why we were providing them the second set of computers and equipment. And it was determined at that point that we had already gone down the slippery slope and to maintain course.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to reverse course on any of this would be difficult.
Can we see what's required? Do we need to provide what is required from us so we can actually go from that?
John, did you pull that contract or is there a contract?
No, I didn't pull the contract. No. You're talking Article 5?
No, the guardian ad litem.
As far as I know, the only obligation that we would have was contractual, whatever we entered into.
Yeah, so we need to look at that and see what it's actually in line.
For this one, the extra space, just reading the justification down there, they're asking for it potentially to be in the courthouse. I'm just wondering if when the new sheriff's ops building is, and the sheriff moves out of there, maybe they'll have an opportunity at that point. Just off the top of my head, but read the justification there.
That would be one that, you know, they could work out between Luke Gibbons and Mark Weinberg. That would be a way to deal with that.
Yeah. They're presently in space that was once allocated by the Sheriff's Office Civil Division. They moved to a second floor location and it created this place. They used to be down the hall, right outside the finance wing.
It's clearly a court function.
Oh, yeah.
Next is the state attorney. They submit their budget to us, pretty flat. Same with our public defender here.
So just a, okay. I was just wondering how their communication went down 2,000 and the state attorney went up 2,000. I don't know.
State attorney added radios, didn't they?
The state attorney radios 194. This is general fund. That is one of the conversations that John, you and I think need to have, and potentially Jorge, with these groups. Combined, that building pays more in communications than the county general fund does for most everything else. If you really added up the numbers of
So because they're in the general fund,
etc.
So they're in the general fund, so we are able to pay less for communications, but because they're in the state court or the 194 fund, they're paying a lot more.
No, there's a lot of internet connections in that building. That I think we need to get to the road of what does everybody really need. They've all put in their own independent connections, plus also have shared connections through the clerks. Then we ultimately would also provide as part of our communications. So I think we need to have a conversation overall of looking at these numbers are starting to explode. If you add the general fund, the 001 to the 194, those expenses are pretty large numbers once you add up the sum of the whole of all their communication needs. And I think it's one of those that we might have to have a conversation of if everybody has their own individual point-to-point connections, Do they need to share in a gross number somewhere out? You know, what can we do to save some, create better efficiencies? Because it seems like the communications over the years have grown up. I mean, this one only went from $136 to 3,000 back down to 1,000. This one is 21,000 going up to 26. You'll start seeing some increases on them as we go through this group, and we've discussed that. We just have to pull a meeting potentially of all the heads of the IT as well as the head administrators for all these groups to get a little bit of an
Because
understanding.
that's a significant increase for that, I think. And then, I mean, we should be able to pull out 3410 or something like that, but they don't have any actuals and anything else with communication.
Jared, just to provide a little bit more explanation to the folks listening in. So the BOCC has one internet service provider, like for example, somebody at home has Spectrum, just one account for the entire BOCC,
We have one account for this campus.
for this campus. Okay.
Correct. So we have a 1 gig pipe presently in our campus. We utilize the clerk of court has a 1 gig pipe as well.
Yeah.
So we utilize theirs as our backup.
Okay.
They utilize ours as their backup. So right now we share.
Okay.
But then all the state attorney, public defender, court administration, they all have their own independent connections as well.
In that
So-
same building.
Correct. So they may have point-to-point connections between here and the land for all the different entities. And they need some of that for security. But we might be able to look at, you know, is that the best way to do it with VPN tunnels?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Is that normal? Is that what do other places do? You know? I don't even know if you know.
Everybody's starting to find, I talked to Volusia, they all are sort of autonomous. But there's also some fees in here for help with the clerk's connection, and they ride the clerk's network. So it's a very integral part working with that group over there. It's very integrated. We just, I think, need to get an understanding and truly almost a map of how things are connecting, and are we paying the best dollar amount for the connections? I mean, we pay
Hate to duplicate.
a little over $3,000, almost we call it 4,000 by the time you're done, for our internet and phone service here on this campus coming in through Spectrum. Well, if you look at a lot of these, you know, that's $48,000 that runs the backbone for the sheriff, the BOCC, the tax collector, property appraiser, and the supervisor of elections all use our internet connection. You know, and they've got $26,000 alone. Now that doesn't mean the state attorney also has cell phones that might be in here that they need to provide to the county, to the employees that are dedicated to Flagler County, those type of agreements as well. And I've been working with the state attorney's office to already shave some of those costs by putting them, making sure that they're on the right government plans that are, you know, at the best dollar. So a lot of this is a review of all those expenditures to make sure that they're in line with our pricing structure, our most cost-efficient process that we have.
Our Article 5 stuff is only for Flagler County. They know that, so we
They
shouldn't
do.
be paying for anything in any other counties.
They do, like the state attorney, they very clearly have that honed in really well.
Yeah.
The court administrator, they all are locked into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you want to do a pretrial? Yeah. So our pretrial services, we do have an FTE in there. We have the officer. So you have your COLA increase there, and their operating, they were able to decrease a little bit. So Fund 108 is our courthouse facilities.
One of my nemesis funds.
So a little bit with courthouse facilities is the courthouse costs more than, I'll speak a little bit on this because I know Heidi and I have talked
Jump
about
right
it.
in, Jared.
Thanks, Jared.
Heidi
Yeah.
and I have talked a little bit about this one too as well. So ultimately, the cost of running the courthouses costs us more than this fund brings in, the surcharge here. So a little bit, I wouldn't say a little bit, about half, if I'm not mistaken, of it, the courthouse is truly on general fund at this point, and about half is on the fund itself. Where this came into play, you can see where there's some higher numbers there up to the 449,000. There were some years in there that we had some matching equipment for the generators, et cetera. We had to tent and eradicate the termites, I believe was in that building. That really took a big hit to this fund. So this fund is in a rebuild, but we're ultimately emptying the tank. For as much as it comes in, we're spending it out and then some. So it's not self-sustaining.
the revenue for this fund is from the $30 ticket surcharge that we get, and it's supposed to take care of our state court facilities. There's a lot of expenditures in there, and we did have some cash in there a couple years ago, but then we fronted that cash for those generators, and we're waiting for the reimbursement. So that'll help that fund. But the long-term view of this fund is not very pretty, actually. So expenditures are going up, and at this point anyway, the revenues are not really keeping up. So
Courthouse security costs more, Magna founders cost more. I think we had the front X-ray machine go down a few years ago.
And what that does, it falls back to burden the general fund, because we're gonna make sure everybody's safe. So
I hope I did Heidi good on that one.
You did good. You did good.
Domestic Violence Trust Fund. This is more money that we get here from the clerk of court here, and it's just carried over. There's no expenses here. We just have that money saved.
Just looking at what the funding is.
Yeah, it's $201 is funded by the domestic violence
From the courts.
cases, and then it's meant to go back and help pay for the training for law enforcement related to combat domestic violence.
Alcohol and Drug Abuse Trust, kind of the same situation here. There's no expenditures other than your bank analysis fees. Money just there in its own reserve.
Can be used to fund alcohol and drug abuse programs designated by the board.
This is Jared's baby here.
So we made a change last year to move the court innovation technologies, or what we call the 194 accounts, over to IT. So right now I've been signing on a lot of these. Once again, this is $2 from every reporting fee comes into this fund. We anticipate, we had 240,000, I believe. It looks like you got a little bit higher note in here, about 400,000, another 160,000 increase this year, anticipating those recording fees going up as part of the housing.
Housing going crazy, yeah.
So this does help. So what this fund is this is supposed to help out with the technology necessary to run the court operations through the court administration, the state attorney, the public defender, a portion of the clerk's court-related funds, and there was another division, John. They don't really ask for money, but what's the other smaller group?
That can use this?
Yeah.
Court administrator, state attorney, public defender, and regional counsel.
Regional counsel, that was the one that I always miss.
Regional conflict.
So we're in here, so we've asked them all for their budgets. You'll see a small decline in the website design, and small increase to about $7,000 in their network circuit. So see that $25,000 plus the number on the previous plus the number. These will hit large numbers.
Yeah, that's it. So that 25 is
in addition
to the other 25 or 26, whatever.
Yep. So 27,000 for maintenance agreements for their benchmark viewers, their Office 365. That is not the Office 365 the county has. They do have their own licensing for that. And then a reduction. They bought some computers last year, so a reduction of $10,000 down to $10,000 for equipment. A reduction in their software upgrades. They did put $30,000 in. I believe this was for some servers and storage backup type upgrades that they need to be able to do at the court administration. So there's a negative $300, not too much off.
So just to interject, as Jared mentioned, it's the $2 doc stamps that we get for filing paperwork, those type of things. The statute is another Article 5 funding mechanism that we're allowed to charge to fund our mandate for Article 5. So in this one, we're not required to fund anything further than what that revenue brings in. That being said, it'll be a hard discussion to have to say we're not, that's all you get kind of a thing. So we're really, we've been burning through fund balance and reserves on this one last couple of years. So we're really concerned about being able to keep up with the requirements of the fund. So this is one of the funds that we're really keeping a close eye on.
And this year we were able to take some money from what we had cash carry forward to fund a network upgrade over there to the tune of about $400,000. We've been able to put some Zoom cameras in some of the courtrooms. We've been able to do a jury assembly area modernization. But as this draw, and I can get to that as we get the cash carry forward, we've been drawing this down to a very dangerous limit. I think because of some of the good that we've had, we've put some money back into that this year, but we have to be very careful because when we have to go modernize 4 courtrooms, or actually 6 courtrooms, those are very expensive when you have to start replacing all the Crestron, all the automation, the TVs, the security cameras, all those different things. So we've been
And this is in addition.
using money.
This is in addition to the clerk's IT operation.
Clerk's IT operation, which is general fund, and then they also have another $1.90 that they get. So we get $2. The clerk also gets $1.90 just for their own operation.
Okay.
So we fund all these out of our 2. They also get an individual $1.90 to fund their portion. So if you ran the number at the top, which I believe was, what did we just say, 500,000 for the year?
400,000.
They would get roughly 390, 380
Not on our books.
on their books on top of this each year, direct. So with this, you've got state attorneys. State attorney's got 10,500 in here for communications for this year. It's a break even. Some maintenance agreements. They did buy computers this year. They bought 25 computers for the $25,000. And next year they reduced to 8,000 to buy some docks and whatnot. So they've asked an additional $1,000 for some licensing. They show about a 13.5. They've got some hardware and server changes they need as well. Public defender has communications recurring 23,607. So that's what I'm saying. These numbers are pretty big numbers when you look at them as an aggregate total. They've gone up a little bit. Their maintenance contract's not terribly much. They've dropped some money. I'm not sure what that was on their equipment for room temperature device, and they've got their Westlaw upgrade. So we do pay for Westlaw. You saw that in the library fund. You're going to see the sheriff pays for a small Westlaw fund. You're going to see that most of these entities also pay for their own Westlaw fund. So we sort of use the same product throughout. All the different entities have their own Westlaw fund.
Have you added up all the communication costs?
I have not.
Is it like 150,000, 200,000?
I would
For the 2?
I would hate to say that, but it's up there.
They're both, those 2 are 50 each, so.
Yeah, so we have that, and then we have the court, the 4801 at the bottom. This one is the one that is the clerk and some of the projects that we have. We have some network connections over there as well. So we have some upgrades going on over there that are on the digital side, on the technology side. So you see that fund balance, it's not in here. We'd have to probably find the original reserves from previous years, is it there? Well, that's the 637. But if you look from when I started, it was a little over, what, $1 million, $1.5 million?
Yeah, the
Somewhere
zero
around there.
The zero's up there because those are actuals. We don't have any actual expenditures out of reserves. That's why those are zeros. But
So if you look historically, we've gone from $1.5 million down to 637. Originally, we were thought we were going to be around 300 this year at the end after we took the numbers we took out, but we've actually done really well in tax stamps because of house sales. So now Brian has informed me that we expect to put about $90,000, $83,000 back in. So this number will get readjusted as the audit occurs, and we'll actually have our actuals for next year. So we just got to be careful because some of these things get very expensive.
And sometimes things are cyclical too. So that 400,000 we said, and there was something else that was out there too. I suppose it was time to do those things, and those do take hits like that every once in a while. We just have to rebuild those reserves now.
When I budget for these, we budget out 5 years, figuring a 5-year cycle on most everything. You can stretch some things to 7 or 8 years, but as I said in mine, now the vendors are going back saying most of your replacements should be done in 5 to 6 years. So we try and look at that 5-year chart to make sure that we do have enough money to keep carrying us forward for those unexpected items that may happen, down the line. So things are expensive, but we're working through that. So. This is all the follow-up. So they have their new Nutanix, their Synologies, their connections between, and we can examine this a little bit John, like I said, I think we're gonna have to sit down with them and say, hey, where are we at? And that part of our security upgrades that are over there, just so everybody is aware, the majority of our 163, almost 170 doors are in that building. There's about 120 of them in that building. So we have to go through and do a lot of upgrades in that building as part of our security system upgrades to make sure that they're safe and secure. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Amanda Gilbert.
Okay, thank you, Jared.
So the next one is juvenile diversion. Like the other funds, there's money collected from the courts here, and the money's just there until there's a program to be funded.
Qualified.
Yeah. The money is swept into the next fund that we're going to go to, which is Court Innovations. So this one, we do have a full-time FTE in there, our drug court coordinator. And again, these are fees that are collected from the courts. We have drug testing and screening mostly out of here.
Okay.
Our teen court, we do have another FTE in here. We have a teen court coordinator. This is a $3 fee that goes to help aid the teen court.
These are all court employees, right? You say we have an FTE there.
There are, yeah.
Oh.
When it's an FTE, it's ours.
I know I'm not here to ask questions, but is the drug court potentially a newer person than the teen court? Because I noticed a big disparity in pay between the two.
Is the what?
Drug court and teen court, the pay difference, there's about an $8,000 pay difference between the two. So I'm guessing one must be a more seasoned employee or it's been here a little
They
longer.
may have.
It's a good question. How we can definitely take a look and see what it is.
Our legal aid fund is our legal aid. General fund does help if need be on that one. Our law enforcement trust fund. This is money that we get from the sale of confiscated equipment. Flat, if we do collect more money, then we can take that to the board and get a URR for more money. Our crime prevention fund, here we have the grants have been temporarily suspended. So there is not activity here unless the board directs us, then we can move funding towards it again.
This is the fund that the public safety coordinating council.
Yes.
This is the fund that they use.
That's it for our judicial funds.
To debt service,
Debt service.
finish up strong.
So our first one here, this is our ESL debt service. The millage here split between this and our operating.
And just to point out that these are general obligation bonds for the ESL, environmentally sensitive lands. So that's why we're showing the ad valorem taxes as a revenue for those that voter approved.
So the total yearly requirement is 2.5 million. Or is there additional services that we'll see here?
Yeah, we have some fund balance there to carry forward, probably for sinking fund requirement purposes, but the 1.16 is what we're paying in, yeah. I guess, right? Interest,
Yes.
yeah.
So we're holding about a year of debt service in reserve.
Okay. But that's all the debt service we have on a yearly basis.
For
that.
For
For
that one.
For that fund,
okay,
yeah.
that fund.
Each fund, each debt service fund has its own obligation, so we got a few of those. And there are we're making debt service payments from other funds as well. So this isn't all inclusive, like for example, we saw Rory in the airport fund had some debt, 3 other.
This is the refinancing of the Judicial Center. This is more voted debt millage here. 212, this is our refinancing of this complex, the jail expansion, and the sheriff operations. That's what this debt is paying.
Old sheriff's operation.
The old, yes, sorry, the old sheriff's operations.
It's still being paid.
$213 here, this is our Painters Hill seawall assessment. Next one, 214, is the HOA dune restoration. I believe this one's being paid off fairly soon, right?
Couple years.
4.
24?
23? Oh, wrong.
Soon. I mean, this was the short one. And our last one is our new Sheriff Operations Center.
And we haven't, we're gonna end up we could pull up upwards of $20 million for that, but we're pulling out as we need it to save on interest, so that's why I don't see really large paybacks right now.
That's it.
Good job.
Thank you.
It's nice to see those debt retirements that y'all do.
Feels good. Feels good.
Do you have anything you want to say to
No
close it
closing
out before
remarks.
we go?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much for sticking with us through all these 2 days. It's been very informative. Hopefully, you had an opportunity to learn more about the county budget process. And this will go on to as a budget hearing September.
But the public hearings are in September.
September to the Board of Commissioners for review. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared, we should have a vaudeville